Good evening, everyone. It's 5:30, so we're going to get started. My name is Malini Sims, and I'm a principal planner with the town of Oro Valley. And joining me this evening are other town staff, including Paul Melcher, the Community and Economic Development Director, and Bayer Vella, our planning manager. We would love, if you can, to please turn on your camera just so we can get to know each other's faces. We are going to skip the fun icebreaker. I won't get to know what your favorite candy or cake is this time because we have a lot to cover tonight, so I'm just going to jump right into the presentation. Just give me one moment as I share my screen. Right, so the purpose for tonight's meeting is to check in with the group to see if the plan accurately reflects the collective resident voices heard over the past 2 years or if revisions are needed. As a reminder, the process to create the next 10-year action plan started in 2023 by listening to residents to identify their values, priorities, and expectations for Oro Valley's future. So many of you may have taken a survey, added comments online, or stopped by a booth in the community to contribute to the over 10,000 comments that are being used to create the plan. Starting at the beginning of this year, there were 4 resident working groups that collectively met 25 times to transform that guidance into draft goals, policies, and actions. This produced a 30% draft, which was then reviewed by resident working groups, stakeholders, boards, commissions, and town council. In September, the comments from the 30% draft were incorporated into the first complete draft of the plan, which was the 60% draft. This draft was released to the entire community for further review, and this was known as the Big Community Review, which resulted in over 2,400 website visits and an additional 256 comments. Now, the majority of these comments that were received through the Big Community Review were already addressed in the plan or just resulted in minor changes to wordsmithing and clarifications. However, there were a handful that needed to be discussed further. And our goal tonight is to discuss the 3 remaining topics, which includes views, housing types, and high-quality design. We will also discuss the proposed revisions to the actions we discussed last Tuesday, which were the Performing Arts Center and Community Gathering Space. And with that stated, we are at a point in the process of refinement. This means we aren't aiming to make any big shifts from what the community already reviewed. We will then wrap up our meeting to talk about next steps for OV's path forward and end by 7:30. Now, our aim at this meeting is to achieve consensus on a 90% draft of the plan, also referred to as the resident recommended draft. The definitions for consensus that the group came up with at your first meeting in January are shown on the screen. Especially as we get into the details, it's important to remember our goal is to achieve balance and compromise to create a plan that represents the majority of the community. Your number one task as a resident working group is to craft a plan that represents the collective resident voices heard over the past 2 years. The fact that there are only a handful of areas that need to be discussed shows that the plan is on the right track, so let's keep that momentum going. Now, there are some changes you can expect to see in the next iteration of the plan. First are related to the land use map. The land use map does not grant any property rights, but shows the intended vision for development in Oro Valley. It includes a planning area boundary as well as an urban service boundary, both of which are legally required and represent areas outside of the town limits that influence the town's quality of life, traffic, environmental resources, and more. They do not represent the areas where the town is going to annex. The Development Resident Working Group extended these boundaries west to Marana's town limits. And in our preliminary discussions with the town of Marana, they suggested these boundaries exclude the 3 areas shown on the map with an X. These are larger lot residential areas that are or have pursued annexation with the town of Marana. Additionally, Pima County helped us increase accuracy on the map by updating some of the land use designations to reflect existing county zoning or developments. A notable area is outlined at the top of the map in red, at the very top of your screen. This spotted brown area is also outside of the town's limits, but was previously designated as being 60% open space. However, the county now owns this area and it is 100% open space. So you will see it change from the spotted brown color to the green, just like the area south of the site. And then lastly, as many of you have heard, Amphi is looking to close some of their elementary schools, one of which may be Copper Creek Elementary, which is located in Oro Valley. Through our preliminary discussions with them about the 10-year plan, they did ask that the action related to school capacity, which is shown on the screen, be broadened to remove focus on the need for a middle school. Now, all of our topics for discussion tonight are related to housing, specifically apartments and affordable housing options. Your charge is to help determine if the language in the draft plan accurately reflects the collective community's voice and, in some instances, achieves balance between opposing perspectives. Views was the most challenging topic for the group to navigate. As shown in the surveys, protecting views is a high priority and the community is concerned about building height. Now, last time many of us spoke, the plan had language that limited all buildings to 3 stories. However, the resident working group felt this blanket approach failed to capture some of the nuances regarding height. For instance, there are areas and uses that may warrant taller buildings. The hospital was given an example that folks agreed as being okay and making sense. Or for instance, if Roche, which is a major employer in Oro Valley, needs additional height, the plan should allow that to be considered. Now, from those conversations, the policies, which are shown on the right-hand side of the screen, were created to capture these nuances that the resident working groups discussed, but also honor what the community said about taller buildings, especially apartments, without outright saying no to apartments. During the 60% review, there were comments concerned about tall building heights and also concern about the first 2 policies related to apartments. I do want to mention that these policies not only aim to reflect the collective community's perspectives, but also the market in Oro Valley. So when you think about apartment communities in Oro Valley, most are 2 to 3 stories. The developers for the Oro Valley Marketplace did propose taller apartments, but that was an exception. Typically, developers, when they come to Oro Valley, they do only want to go 2 to 3 stories in this market. And that's one reason is because anything over 3 stories does cost more money. Now, the third policy on the screen aims to capture the flexibility needed to allow specific types of uses, like primary employers or revenue-generating businesses, to request taller building heights. The policy would allow the town to consider these requests on a case-by-case basis. So the term consider is purposeful here, as it would not automatically grant taller building heights. And the fourth policy reflects existing standards that the town applies during the development review process. Now, the second area with probably the most attention was the housing goals, policies, and actions. This is the first time the town has had this many goals, policies, and actions related to housing in a 10-year plan, so it's not surprising that there's a lot of discussion around them. And what we heard through the surveys was 90% of residents value home ownership, and they want to see more housing varieties like townhomes, duplexes, and low-rise apartments. There are a few areas in the draft plan where housing types are specified, and that starts with the draft guiding principle. So similar to the view policies, the guiding principle specifies appropriate locations for dense apartments. This reflects the survey responses and previous discussions with the resident working group. However, through the 60% review, there were a few comments concerned that the term limit may provide a negative connotation. Now, many of you may recall the image at the top of the screen. It was used during the previous resident working group meetings to define the various housing types and what's meant when we're talking about apartments and where they should be located throughout the town. Other actions were specific housing types and the value for home ownership are reflected on the screen. During the 60% review, there were comments about adding apartments or other renter-friendly options to some of these actions. I do want to clarify that Action 243 reflects a recent state law that requires all jurisdictions to publish pre-approved home designs for a variety of attached housing units and accessory dwelling units by 2027. So the question before the group tonight is, does the plan accurately reflect the community's desires when it comes to apartment and renter-friendly options, or do these actions need to be refined to achieve better balance? Lastly, with regards to housing types, there were concerns about manufactured homes being mentioned in the plan. The resident working group also discussed manufactured homes, at length. They did acknowledge that it was an affordable option, but may not fit in Oro Valley. So for those of you who are unaware, manufactured homes are currently only allowed in one zoning district, which encompasses the Highland Mobile Homes Park. The action as shown on the screen aims to update the zoning code for all site delivered housing types, but also establish perimeters regarding the location and design of manufactured homes to ensure fit. It is not intended to allow manufactured homes throughout the town. Now, the last area to discuss tonight is related to the goal for high quality design standards. So Oro Valley's cohesive design aesthetic that fits into the landscape is valued by residents and was reinforced through the resident working groups, especially to uphold the design standards with various housing types. Through the 60% review, there were concerns that the design standards could impact housing affordability. But I do want to provide some background here. That first, the town's aesthetics didn't occur by accident. When you drive up Oracle, you generally know when you are in Oro Valley due to the town's adopted design standards. These standards apply to model home subdivisions, townhomes, apartments, and non-residential development, and were adopted in 2011. Since they were adopted, the town has not heard that they are unreasonable, and most jurisdictions do have design standards. Now, they have been amended over the years to maintain Oro Valley's character as well as make sure that they remain reasonable. And again, here, the question for the group is whether the goal captures residents' expectations for design in Oro Valley or if it needs to be refined. So now I want to turn the meeting over to you all. As we start discussing these minute details, it is typical for folks to have strong feelings, which is okay, but I want to encourage everyone to remember that our goal tonight is to craft a draft plan that represents the majority of the community by achieving balance between different points of views. And I need everyone's help to keep the discussion moving forward and respectful. And we will be using our virtual whiteboard again here in a moment. As always, you can navigate the whiteboard by using the menu in the lower left, right hand, corner. You can zoom in and out and then use the hand to move around. So with that, I am going to launch our virtual whiteboard. Just give me one moment. All right, so you should be seeing, the whiteboard now. Let me zoom out a little bit. So again, we do have a bit to go through this evening. So what I've done to help us get through everything is added time frames to the top of each discussion item. Most importantly, we do want to hear from everyone. But if you want, you can always use the chat, especially if you agree with somebody's comment. You can use the chat instead of reiterating their comments. And as your facilitator, I will be keeping an eye on the time. to keep us moving through tonight's agenda. After we get through the three topics of discussion, we also are going to take time again to go through the revised actions for the Performing Arts Center and community gathering space. Okay, so we are going to start with views. Again, our charge is do these uh, policies, and I also put the guiding principle and actions above it, but do they accurately reflect and capture all the nuances related to height, or do they need to be refined? So if you want to raise your virtual hand um, to for questions or comments, I will call on you in the order they appear, and again, you can always use the chat. Okay, so Bill and then Hal. Oh, and Bill, you're muted. Oh,
You'd think I'd learn by now. Uh, on 2 and 3, especially 2, I'm concerned that we can't use the same kind of wording that you use on 3 on 2, or add the apartment, well, they'd be apartments, but that residential that again fits into the requirements under 3, which is we're saying for 10 years we don't want to consider a 4-story apartment building someplace where it doesn't block anybody's view and is economical for the developer and for the tenants. I don't know of any in particular, but I don't know why we would want to just plain cut it off if in fact you can mitigate the view impacts, et cetera, that are in number 3. So I'd like us to consider not loosening that number 2 up a little bit if in fact it doesn't have a view problem or some other problem like that it says in number 3. Thank you.
thank you. Hal?
Well, the first thing that caught my eye is the statistics that are cited, especially the percentages for bullet points 3 to 6. Because you're asking two questions. You're asking, do you support uh, residences of a certain height, 1 to 2 story? And do you support rental homes? All these are qualified as a rental. I think what you're getting such a low percentage. I mean, you got less than 50% even for 1 to 2 story homes. Why is that? Because you're specifying rental homes. If you asked the question differently and said just 1 to 2 story homes, I think you might have got a different result. So I'm really skeptical about what those numbers mean. I generally do agree with Bill, though, that there should be some circumstances where you might be able to go beyond 3 stories. One of the comments that sort of I thought was sort of humorous is it's basic trigonometry. If you send a building back far enough, it's not going to block anybody's view. On the other hand, if you're too close to a building, any building's going to block somebody's view. So I think that you got to have a little bit of flexibility. On the other hand, uh, keeping it simple, it does have some advantages. If you just say no more than 3 stories, well, at least developers know what's expected of them. So uh, I can look at it both ways. And the bottom line is we have to get something that's going to be acceptable to the majority of the people that vote for this plan next year. So if that means we have to limit it to 3 stories, maybe that's what we have to do. Thanks.
Thank you, Hal. And then McKenna and then Rosa.
Hello, friends. Funny seeing you all here again this week. I wanted to comment. I spoke about this at town council as well, but I think that some of the language that we have here is really not the best, unfortunately, as we're looking for, 10 years out in Ora Valley. I agree with what Bill said of well, you never know what's coming down the pipeline. And so why limit ourselves when we aren't aware? Um, I'm born and raised Ora Valley. I love our mountain views. I would not want to endanger those or inhibit those to anybody. Um, and also, there are some spaces in Ora Valley where it's not really obstructive with views to have, higher higher storied buildings and developments. And also in this plan, annexation is discussed. So there's also the possibility that Oro Valley annexes into another area that, again, wouldn't infringe on mountain views or anything along those lines. And yet, if we have this language, we're blocking ourselves into a set policy that I think would be reductive and harmful. So I would encourage that we change some of the language in policies EE1 and EE2. So instead of limit 2 to 3 story apartment communities to targeted sites, I would say something along the lines of like encourage them to those sites or focus them to those targeted sites. So that we are still trying to encourage apartments nearby businesses, which is a positive benefit for both groups. Um, but we're also not forcing ourselves out of potential development that could be beneficial, like the apartments that are going in Rancho Vistosa, where the clubhouse used to be. That's in near residential, and yet without those apartments, we wouldn't have had access to the Rancho Vistosa preserve that we have. So I look at things like that, and I want to make sure that we're not preventing ourselves from getting access to things that might be really beneficial for the community by setting strict language that would prevent us from something in the future that would be really great and beneficial to people. So um, I think, yeah, just continuing to try to loosen the language to allow for that development and not necessarily to say, like, hooray, we want everything in our valley to all be rentals, no more housing for anyone, but just trying to make it so that it is balanced. Again, like trying to represent all of the communities in Oro Valley by just opening up that language and allowing for the development so that we're not communicating to any developers. We absolutely don't want any of those things here, but just trying to focus them and ensure that it's a beneficial partnership for residents, businesses, and developers all together in a happy family here in Oro Valley. So thank you very much.
Thank you, McKenna. And then Rissa.
So I think we're okay with the language we have, and here's my reasoning. I think that apartments and discussion of more apartments is very triggering, and this needs to be voted on. Um, Most of the questions didn't predicate the homes in the pipeline. Like, in other words, how many apartments are already approved and will be built? So right off the bat, 320 in the area of Marketplace that's being graded now, 132 in Rancho Vistoso, but those are highly controversial because it's in a residential area where most people don't want them, but they are approved, and that is R6. So the other thing I want to point out is that all of this discussion of 10 years being a long time, we're 95% built out. And the only available land left is, most of it is commercial. So apartment building and adding residential to that would mean a rezone of some kind. Am I not correct on that? So we're kind of talking about the pie in the sky. We're 95% built out. We have apartments in the pipe, along with additional housing in the pipe, some of which satisfies the next question. So I think we're okay. I think the way it is presented now is something that if I were someone who didn't participate in the process heavily and I was looking to vote on this, I would feel less triggered by, unless, saying encouraging, like you can encourage all you want. The Oro Valley Marketplace owners, because it changed owners, had to ask for the apartments. That property was not zoned for apartments, and Oro Valley agreed because it would be beneficial to the residents to have more more revenue closer to the retail. But they didn't agree with the equivalent of what is being built in down by Foothills right now, which is essentially what was asked for right adjacent to Tangerine Road. So, and which comes into the whole view thing. So I think we've got it right. I mean, I think it needs to be an exception and not a rule to get higher. And I think you have that covered. And so I don't, I'm not, the word limit does not bother me. And I think that it may comfort people who haven't participated in this heavily, but want to look and see, well, what is Oro Valley thinking? Because many of them don't know. Like, I read a lot of the comments that were just ridiculous, like, this council has done all of these things. No, 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 no. Everything that was built in the last 8 years was the last council, not this council. So people don't even know what they're saying half the time. And so I think for the benefit of a document that has to be consumed and voted on, we need to be careful that we're not catering to every, whim and fancy, and keep it to where people who have invested in living here because it's not Tucson can see this as a place that is going to have, the right mindset with rental properties in general. And that's just what I've heard, paying attention to lots of comments throughout this entire process and listening to what people say in social media about, what's going on right now. Like, there's a lot of negative comments about Marketplace. People going, oh my gosh, this council's terrible for approving these apartments. And it's like they didn't follow the process. They don't understand how we got where we were. But generally speaking, the comments about the grading for Marketplace have been negative. They have not been positive. So that's my 2 cents.
Okay, thank you, Rosa. We did get a question in the chat. If there's been significant demand or interest from residential developers for heights over 3 stories. Buyer can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is there hasn't, other than the Marketplace who came in asking for 5 stories. Most developers are asking for 3 stories, 2 and 3. But
And I might be able to just second that, Malini, in that I have worked with several developers recently that are adamant about not going above 3 stories because of the costs are exponential and it doesn't match a suburban market. So, and I do want to caution everyone to remember that, I agree with you how, the wording certainly could have been better in the question, but it's unmistakable, I think, how folks overall in Oro Valley feel about buildings over 3 story, particularly when it comes to apartments. Whether it's rational or not is a whole nother discussion, but it's a real thing. And I agree with Rosa, it's a serious voter risk to stray from what our surveys have told us, even though our surveys aren't perfect, but they are definitely pointing the needle in the right direction. And I think that just raises the bar to make sure we're reflecting that and we have a balance in our policies to not say no, but respect some of the red lines. And building height, I think we can all agree, whether that it is a true red line in Oro Valley, whether that's rational or not, whole nother discussion. So thank you.
Expire. Cheryl, and then we're going to go to Matt because he hasn't had a chance to speak, and then Hal will go back to you.
I agree with both Rosa and Buyer on that. If you look at that survey, which is what we're supposed to be developing this plan around, it was only 14% of the residents in the statistically valid part of it that thought that the 4 and 5 story apartments would be acceptable. They're just not right here for Oro Valley. And I do think it is a risk for us to change what the people have clearly said. And in addition, and talking about not right for the suburban environment, I agree with that. We are not Tucson. Tucson can have all the 5 and 6 and 7 story buildings that they want to put down there. They're a city. We are not. We never were planned to look like a city. No one wanted to be Tucson when they were looking to annex or set up Oro Valley as its own town. And I think we have a very, very good reputation now with the look of Oro Valley and the design standards and everything that we have. We are almost like the Beverly Hills of this area. And I don't see any problem keeping it that way, just like Sedona keeps its image of the, certain things. We can't be everything to everybody, because what it does is it dilutes our image and it takes away from the other comments that are here in this survey that said the least like things that they like in Oro Valley are traffic that needs to be changed. They want fewer homes and less growth, fewer apartments, more, more homes, or more, at least more living or types of living arrangements. So we really do need to be careful, because people do have strong opinions about this. And if they don't like the fact that, oh, we could do 5-story buildings, and oh, we can do more apartments, and oh, we can do manufactured housing, and they have bad connotations, they're going to vote no. So I just caution everybody on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Matt, and then Hal.
Oh, thanks. So, I mean, basically, people move to Oro Valley because they like the way it is now, and they don't want to see, big changes. And I think that's kind of where we're going with the taller buildings and everything. I think just keep it the way it is, make little changes, and they'll vote for it. If we make drastic changes, this thing could go down in flames. So we want to be a little bit careful there. Thanks.
Thank you. Hal.
So the one change that just came to mind for me would be to EE3, which does allow for higher buildings, but only for non-residential uses, as I read that. Uh, the one residential use that where I think you may want to allow for a higher building would be a senior apartment complex, where even if it's a two-story building, uh, they're really going to have to put in elevators, which is really one of the big expense items associated with taller buildings. So I'd like to see some wording in EE3 that allows for senior apartment complexes to be taller than 3 stories. And that would be like La Posada, for example.
Okay, thank you, Hal. Then we did get another comment in the chat about possibly rewarding it to consider additional height requests and including residential. And there is a question about what highly significant is. So we did try, this aims to capture when the nuances, it is for like hotels, primary employers. So to get bigger heights for those, again, that's like the Roche and the hospital. And then Bev asked if senior living facilities is included residential. So Bev, yes, or commercial, they are included commercial, but to clarify in the policy to House Point, it does say senior care in that policy itself. The one about restricting those to 3 stories. Okay, and then I don't see any new hands up, but McKenna, if you want to speak again.
Thank you. I just wanted to pop in and say that I don't think that the changes that I said are necessarily saying, like, again, bring all the apartments here. We want all of the riffraff in Oro Valley. I recommended that we change the language from limit 2 to 3 story apartment communities to focus 2 to 3 story apartment communities. So it's not saying like we want all of them every single possible place. It's just opening up the door to the possibility of it. With the closure that's coming to Copper Creek at Copper Creek Elementary closing down, with the downturn that we've seen with family living in Oro Valley, I think part of it is because as people are graduating and aging out of high school and those sort of things, they then don't have the next steps to living in Oro Valley. So I'm sorry, I don't remember who made the comment, but it was something along the lines of like, who's invested in living in Oro Valley? And is it homeowners or would it be apartment owners? And a lot of times apartment owning is the stepping stone to investing in a home. So I can't currently afford a down payment on a house. I'd love to get there. But in the meantime, I could afford an apartment if there was availability in Ora Valley. And um, there's not. We have a really low vacancy rate, which then means that apartment prices go up. So having apartments is not necessarily, I think, the enemy that it sometimes gets labeled as. And when we say things like limit 2 to 3 story apartment communities, and restrict rezoning requests for residential, we're limiting ourselves to the possibility of having more of those stepping stones to, again, encourage people to become homeowners in Ora Valley, to encourage, our younger adults to return to our community and help sustain it with purchases and things along those lines. So I completely understand not wanting to turn into a quote unquote like Tucson or any of those things, but I think by removing that stepping stone towards home ownership, we're removing access to a large community of people that are working, that are trying to support our employers like Roche and the hotels, and the hospital, right? Like we're missing out on supporting an important community within Ora Valley, and so that's again why I would say something more along the lines of focus these apartments to these locations, or just changing the language to not completely cancel out the idea, but also not say like we're going to build at least 800 apartment complexes in 10 years, right? Like just trying to narrow down, and allow the possibility and leave the openness, so that there's decision making that's happening in the future, and leaving the door open.
Great. Thank you, McKenna. So maybe I could focus us a little bit on the language in EE1. There are also comments in the chat of changing the word limit to either focus or locate. So I added that also to the whiteboard. Let's go with Sharon and then Michael. We haven't heard from either of you yet.
So, first of all, I don't have a lot to say other than to just say I really hate to hear. First of all, I really feel McKenna's comments, and I hate to hear someone who was born and raised here to talk about, yeah, there's nothing for me, and that kind of that on the way up to try to stay here and invest in here. I feel that about almost every part of this plan, that we simply have to think about balancing and making sure that we're thinking about the future. And McKenna's the future. We're here, but how long will we be here? I'm concerned that we over focus perhaps on the older residents. Look, we all love it here. There's no doubt about that. But we also want businesses, and businesses want more than just older residents. They want a lot of different residents. So we I think have done an amazing job as a city, or excuse me, as a town, developing a kind of a reputation as a really wonderful place to live. But I think we're starting to cut out those young people who have graduated from college, who are starting their jobs perhaps in our industrial zone. Wow, that's tough. And I've heard it in previous meetings. So it's a concern. However we have to get there, we have to find balance with people who are young people who want to stay in their hometown and grow their families here as well.
Michael J.
Thanks, Melanie. So I have the comment about EE3, and right when I was writing that, Hal was speaking, and I wanted to say that I agree strongly with Hal that maybe the EE3, and I think this is what he was saying, language, my reading is it does not allow residential. And my question is, do we want to allow the consideration, not allow residential, but allow the consideration of residential taller heights? I know that is in a sense just putting the fight further down the road, but I think Hal had a good point. So that's it. Thanks.
So I'm also seeing in the chat that a lot of agreement with softening or neutralizing, as some people put it, the language in policy EE1. So let me just check in with the group. Right now, policy EE1, and we don't have to choose a specific word, but it says limit 2 to 3 story apartment communities. As a head nod, or if we want, and we can definitely continue discussing it, but is the group have consensus that changing the word limit to something more like focus or locate might be a better direction? Seeing head nods, thumbs up. Yes, okay. So it looks like we've got some direction there. Let's go though to Cheryl, then Joe, and then Gail and Tony.
Well, on the heights of the buildings, I think the question specifically said 5-story apartments. It could just have easily have been asked as 5-story buildings, and I think it would have had the same 14%. And the reason I say that is because a lot of people do not like La Posada. It's very, you can see it from almost every place in town. And I can remember when they did the initial tours for that building, and it was supposed to be nestled back and designed by the Frank Lloyd Wright student and things like that. And they took us up to Steam Pump Ranch and they showed us with balloons, which were again blowing in the breeze. And it looked like you wouldn't be able to see it. But in fact, you can see it clearly from Steam Pump Ranch. You can see it from the Holiday Inn. You can see it from most any place you look on the loop, you can see it, you can find some aspect of it. So, and on top of that, it's a nonprofit. It really doesn't bring any revenue, much revenue after the construction fees, because people there have their meals served to them, and I don't know that they're out shopping if they're that much while they're here in town. So that's one thought. And what else was I going to say? So I'm not sure that I would want the 5-story change to include the senior living as well, because of that reason. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Joe?
Well, I guess maybe I'm kind of hung up that we're debating the word limit. And couldn't there be a word other than limit, such as regulate? That
Yeah.
would give flexibility and direction, but not set a firm standard, and each question or variance would be evaluated on its merits. So maybe we ought to be looking at what is a word other than limit that we can be using.
Yeah, so Joe, I think, and the group, correct me if I'm wrong, but looking at everybody's faces, I think everybody's in agreement to revise the word limit. So we're working another word. I don't think we need to exactly, and you guys are putting a lot of great ideas in the chat, but I don't think we need to agree on the word tonight. We'll definitely look into it, but I did hear you loud and clear to take out the word uh, limit and revise the word limit.
Yeah, limits, right?
Yeah, thank you.
It takes away flexibility.
Okay. So we have a couple more minutes on this topic. This does bleed into the next topic, so we could take a little bit more time here, but I, it's still like a little bit more guidance on policy EE2 and EE3. Because I've heard a lot of maybe merging them, including residential and EE3. Do want to remind folks though that I would also point that regardless of the survey, I will say from being at events and sitting at booths and seeing things online, I would agree that it doesn't matter what the use is, if it's apartments or anything, people typically they don't want 5-story buildings here. They don't want tall buildings. Now, I do understand there are places where they make sense, but overall, even when La Posada and those things were going through, there was a lot of mitigation that had to be done to get those through. And that wasn't an easy decision, I think, even for the community to to understand. So let's see. Okay, so any further comments on EE2 and EE3? We'll go to Gail.
Thanks, Melanie. Just really quick, as I'm thinking about this, I'm okay with changing the language as long as there is some kind of process or limits or whatever to how it gets decided and who gets to weigh in to say, I live close to that property and it's going to block my view. So when you think about La Posada, to Cheryl's point, you can see it from everywhere. Could people that live 4 miles away stand up and say, well, I think that's going to block my view, and just turn it into such a difficult and lengthy process to try to approve something bigger? And I don't need an answer to that now, and I'm sure it's something buyer can respond to. But if we, in the absence of just saying we're not going to allow it taller than 3 stories, then we need to understand how those decisions will be made and how people can weigh in, and how does somebody who lives a long ways away still get to say I don't approve of that? I mean, that's all I was trying to get at.
Yeah, sure. So the way the policy would be implemented now is it would be requests for additional height. So that would require the public review process. There are some areas in the town now that they can currently go above 3 stories. They have those existing zoning rights. So that wouldn't be a request, if you will. They're already allowed to do that. But if they wanted to request to go over a height they're not already allowed, then that's when they would go to neighborhood meetings, planning and zoning commission, and town council, if that helps clarify. And then Bill? Oh, and you're muted, Bill.
Sorry. No, there were comments made that there's not that much land left in the town, so why are we even thinking about it? That could be built with apartments. But we are looking, I believe, and I've heard the mayor talk about it, so it's not just one side or the other, about annexations. And the 880 to the west of the edge of the town is a blank slate. And so to limit to 3 stories, even though it won't block anybody's views or have any other thing, it should be able to mitigate that as well as we look at what can we get developers to want to do with the property to make it work out. And the fact that people live in apartments, maybe they aren't paying a use tax of some sort. The fact is they buy things and they pay sales tax, etc. So I think to restrict for 10 years something that could affect not just the 880, but maybe other annexations that we don't know as we look to figure out our financial issues in town. So I would really strongly suggest, I agree with Hal in his comments. So thank you.
Thank you, Bill. And Buyer did put in the chat that neighbors to the 880 state land were also concerned about building heights in areas proposed for the apartments as well. Okay, and then Sandy, we haven't heard from you yet.
I was just going to say that from my personal experience volunteering at a number of the public events, 3 or 4 or 5, I can't remember now, where we would ask residents as they would walk by our booth. I don't recall anyone who didn't dislike the idea of any apartments over 3 stories. It was unanimous from anyone I heard from. So I think that supports the survey. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. Okay, then Rosa and Cheryl.
So I just wanted to clarify some things. We're talking about the building heights and and available land because that's what we have to do. Annexation, and I think I heard the same thing Bill Rodman heard, that the mayor encouraged investigating the 880, but that's a far cry from we're going to go ahead and do anything out there. There are a lot of problems with that annexation in terms of what would it benefit the average, Oro Valley resident that doesn't want a property tax. The biggest is that the water director was brought to the dais to answer whether he thought it was a good idea. And he said if we were under different, water considerations than we are currently in, which meaning the drought and what changes we will have to our cap allocation, he said he would not have been as critical, but under the current conditions and the uncertainty, he wouldn't advocate because we are the only ones that can supply the water to that property. So we're circling back again. Okay, we're reaching for things. Yes, annexation is a great idea, but my understanding is our strategy would be to try to annex areas that already have existing retail because that provides us with the revenue that we need. And you do an annexation primarily to generate revenue. So I don't want to change my opinion. And the other thing I want to bring up is that this idea that we are somehow beleaguering the young people who grew up here from staying here is ridiculous. It is the same everywhere in the country. When you graduate from college, you can't just walk out and buy a house. Okay, you have to have a strategy. And even if we could do that in Oro Valley, like create affordable housing for all the young people who grew up here, we would have to really have a stock of housing. I mean, it would have to be way larger than we've been talking about here to get the prices down because the marketplace is not about to provide affordable housing. Those apartments are going to be very expensive, even though they're new and added to our stock. The apartments, if they ever build them in Rancho Vistoso, will not be cheap. So in order to get that desired, goal of keeping the young people here, I think it's the same everywhere in the country. You have to have a strategy, like moving in with your parents and living with them for 3 to 5 years to build up that extra cash that you need to put on a down payment. There's ways to do it, but I don't think it's the responsibility of this 10-year plan. I think that it just isn't the responsibility of this 10-year plan. And we want this voted on by the people who already live here, who are invested here, and who want to recognize their town in the plan. And so I think like we have to be careful, how we approach this. And, I don't think that we need to throw the kitchen sink at it. Annexations are not going to help define building height. As the former person who just spoke, just talking informally to people in this town, building height is very important. They want the landscape of Oro Valley to be visible from everywhere, not just the mountains, but they want to see the sunsets, they want to see the sky, they want to see that wide open space type feel. And I think that that is something that people, whether they answered the survey or not, would respond to when they're looking to say what is going to be the plan for the next 10 years.
Thank you, Rosa. We're gonna go to Buyer, then Cheryl, and then I'm gonna move us on to the next discussion topic just so we can keep moving forward in the meeting. So Buyer, did you have a comment?
Yes, please. I just wanted to throw out a couple of thoughts. One is an earnest hope that we can get a solution to this tonight and move on because this is always going to be a tough issue. I think we all can see why. I also want to respectfully add to the conversation that I think the time and energy spent on apartments 4 and 5 story from a realistic standpoint, from a market standpoint, from a developer want standpoint is a little bit, I don't know what the right word is, and I can't come up with something that won't sound disrespectful, but it is a bit of a false worry or false narrative, I think, to be so concerned about enabling above 3 stories when developers don't want to do this because of the cost. Ross Rolney, who was going to be building apartments in Rancho Vistoso, after he did apartments over by Dutch Brothers and Oracle that are mostly all 2-story, he swore he would never build another 3-story apartment building again because of the cost to go to 3-story. Each story is a big deal for a developer. The marketplace was a true anomaly. And a suburban market, which would include annexation areas, going above 3 stories does not make economic sense from a developer standpoint. Okay, so it's an interesting debate. And I think everyone on this call in their hearts at the end of the day knows that when this goes to vote and then there's a push for 4 and 5-story apartments, the whole plan is at risk. I have gone through an Oro Valley plan that was voted down. So I'm speaking not from worrywart, I'm speaking from experience. We can't stray from the general community feeling on an issue like building height. You're making the entire plan vulnerable. And I don't want to sound harsh with what I'm saying, but these are realities. So we need to come together with something that reflects some hard realities, whether they're rational or not. This is going to get voted on, and I think Matt said it well. And so in drafting this language, it did incorporate concerns about what Cheryl mentioned with La Posada. You can't hide a 5-story building. The closest you can do to hide a 5-story building is what happened at La Posada. It's positioned really well behind hills. You can still see it. Okay, it does not have immediate neighbors. It's got all the right qualities to minimize the impact of 5-story, but you can still see it. And it's still a concern to the community. We have to respect that. Again, this is going to the vote. So we're trying to optimize, and I certainly hope I didn't offend anyone, but I think those realities have to be front and center in making a final decision. And I'm hoping this helps us get to a decision. So thanks for your patience. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Buyer. And I did see in some of the comments, folks saying, you know, they don't agree with the language, but they can live with it. So I just want to remind folks of our of your definitions of consensus, right? We might not all like everything in the plan. We're not all going to like everything in the plan, but if you can live with it, just keep that in mind as we try to get to that compromise and balance. Cheryl, you had your hand raised.
Yes, I'll be quick. So on the water issue, we're in a 28-year drought. This is the first time that I had ever heard water director say anything to the extent that he did at that council meeting, when he actually said regarding the 885 that as the way things stand now, there's no way that he would be comfortable trying to support a development of that size, which was 2,900 plus living units. So water is one of the biggest concerns here in Oro Valley. Development is the other. The other thing is one of the complaints that you hear often concerning the existing general plan is that you can read through that and go on different pages and be able to justify anything, whether it would be this or that. You could say that this really met the general plan because on page something it did this. So, and on top of that, general plan amendments aren't that hard to do. If we ever come to a place where we need a big 5-story building for something, a general plan amendment can be done. Point of fact, 2016, just before the new council was sworn in, was like 8 days after the current plan was approved, a general plan amendment was done to change it. So we always have that option. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Okay. So I'm just reading through the chat. So I'm not seeing any hands raised. We do have all of your comments. I'm going to move us on. If we have time, we can always come back to this. I didn't really get any consensus here, so we might have to keep working on this one. But let's move on to the next area, which is our housing items. I think if the group's okay with it, the first question I had here was if the word limit should be in the guiding principle. Thinking for consistency, we could also change the word limit here to focus or locate if the group is okay with that. I think we've worked through the word limit, so we're good with that. We will make that change too. So the next question is related to, like I said, there are some actions that specify the types of housing, and these really were derived from the survey, which did say that which people did say they wanted to see more attached types of housing products like townhomes, condos, patio homes. And then also there is the value for home ownership, and that was also reiterated through the resident working group meetings. So the question is, though, is this accurately reflecting the collective community, or does the language need to be refined to include more renter-friendly options like apartments, etc.? So you want to take a moment to read these, and then please raise your hand when you're ready.
Bill, why is it wrong?
What's that?
Why is balance?
Sorry, Malini, can you say the goal like letters or numbers again? I totally missed them.
Oh, sure. So it's under goal BB, which is if you're looking at the plan, there's several policies and actions related to housing variety. Most of them are centered around your attached housing products, so townhomes, patio homes, condos, etc. And also it does reflect the value for home ownership. So the question is that accurately reflecting the community's guidance, or does it need to be revised to include more renter-friendly options or apartments? And that stems from the comments from the big community review, where there were a fair amount of comments about apartments and renter-friendly options not being visible enough in the plan. Mike?
Yes, under Action 247, there's a statement that says research best practices and recommend actions to increase home ownership opportunities. I guess I'm not sure I understand that because almost everybody in town owns a home anyway. So I'm not sure what that's getting at. Is that talking about basically what McKenna's talking about, which is getting younger people to be, more able to achieve home ownership, or is that something else? Because I guess I'm not clear on what that means.
Yeah, so that one would be part of that housing plan, would have recommendations which could have, you know, programs, different types of housing that may help be at a more affordable rate or a lower rate than your typical detached single family home. Looking at, I know people brought up also the lot sizes. So, custom homes on big lots aren't typically what you would consider as a first-time home ownership availability. So looking at even the lot sizes and housing types, to at least have that avenue for home ownership. But that would come from that housing plan and looking at the inventory of what's there, what's left. And I do want to mention, as Buyer put in the chat, that 25% of Oro Valley residents are renters. So, if that helps, Mike. I don't
Okay,
have any.
yeah, so maybe we would just say, to increase homeownership opportunities among renters or something along that line, just to be clear. We're trying to basically upgrade people from renting to owning.
Okay. Oh, sorry, McKenna. Sorry.
It's okay. I'm sure people are shocked that I want to talk about this point. But I agree with Mike. I think that point in there is kind of moot if we are saying that we don't want any more apartments in Oro Valley, or that we don't want apartments, period, in Oro Valley, or renters in Oro Valley, because that's, unfortunately, if as we talked about that, like 25% of OV residents are renters. I don't know the percentage. I don't know if Buyer knows the percentage of those renters that might be like retirees that might be choosing to rent instead of owning a home because they'd rather rent and not have to deal with home ownership, versus, people that even are looking to scale up in home ownership. I would wager a guess that we don't, that there's like a relatively decent split between those two within that 25% statistic. So as we look at language that again talks about limit construction of new high density apartment communities, I think Malini mentioned like just again changing that to be focusing, but yeah, just wanting to encourage again that like apartments are a helpful stepping stone, if we're wanting to continue to encourage young adults, families, people that are trying to make that step up into the Oro Valley community. I think that's an important stepping
Yep.
stone. So yeah.
Thanks, McKenna. And yes, I think the group, I saw a lot of head shakes. We're going to remove the word limit in that guiding principle to focus in both the guiding principle and the policy for views. So there will be consistency there. Okay, seeing just some in the chat. So see, some people said they started out in small townhomes, stayed there until equity was built up, and then was able to buy a house. And so that is, I think that kind of reflects some of what was, and for those of you who are in the housing resident working group, I think that's part of what was discussed is that those missing middle housing, which I know is a jargon term, but those kind of not exactly your high-rise apartments, but your lower-rise apartments like townhomes and patio homes and duplexes could also be part of that stepping stone. There is questions about the 25%. When we did the apartment study, I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, and I don't know if we have it for those who are asking, but it was a lot of renting by choice in Oro Valley. So a lot of folks downsizing, not renting because there weren't other options per se. But there also are a fair amount of single family homes that are actual rentals. So it's not also all the renters aren't in apartments either. And that information is in the background report for OV's Path Forward, so I can follow up on that. And then tiny home communities may be a good start. Susie put that in, which Susie, I appreciate that comment. So right now we would consider tiny homes as also as well, the ones that you see on like HGTV as part of that site delivered housing. So that's another reason to look at that site delivered section of code and updating it because it's not up to date with all the different types of housing that we have now in 2025. Okay, not seeing hands up. Other thoughts about these actions? Cheryl?
Question. I know we added the site delivered homes when we were discussing this, but I don't believe that that was a question at all in any of the choices in the survey itself. Am I wrong about that?
So in the housing survey, there was a question about what types of housing people prefer. It didn't say site delivered, it did say manufactured homes. And what types of housing people think is a need in Ore Valley. And 8% of the respondents said manufactured home housing was a need. But that's the only survey question we had related to that.
Okay. I think about some of the residential properties that may be left in town or that could be considered for a rezoning. And I worry that people seeing site delivered homes that were not something that people had a strong desire for when they were questioned, whether they might have a concern that the property next to them could become a mobile home park, essentially. So that's another one, or a tiny home park. And that's another thing that maybe we need to think about because there's not much land left. I mean, you could think about it for the property at the corner of La Choya and is it Naranja, where there's the north side of the street and the south side of Naranja, or I don't think it's Lambert, but I could be wrong. Anyway, there already has been a request in there, and they did ask for, I think maybe some townhomes in there, and of course the people that were next to it were up in arms. And so it's just when you're putting some other residential type next to them, there could be a concern. Just wanted to share that.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. And I think that's partly of where the origin of these came from was understandably there is the preference for single family homes, especially near other single family homes, but there's also a need for those other types of housing in Oro Valley. So it's finding that balance. Tony? Oh, and Tony, you're muted. Just one moment. Oh, Tony, you're still muted. We can't hear you. There you go.
I think we should take the hard position that manufactured homes are not encouraged in Oro Valley, especially since Oro Valley is a higher economic community, and there's already this mindset against renters, and then manufactured homes come below that. And I don't even think it would be an issue here to bring in manufactured homes or even those tiny homes. I think those are trendy right now. I'm not sure how long that's going to be popular.
Okay, thank you, Tony. I do want to remind folks that specifically manufactured homes were talked about in at length. And the group did agree with you guys that they weren't sure if they were a fit here, but it is an affordable option. And the way the action is written is that it would be parameters to make them similar to the Highlands Mobile Home Park, which if you aren't aware, they do own all of those. And so again, in the spirit of not making any huge significant changes to what the community's already read and commented on, I don't know if we'd want to remove it at this point, but we could definitely look at the language related to those. Rosa?
So as I read this draft goals, policies, and actions, I think that it reads well, and I don't think that anyone coming to this cold would have anything, would not be upset about the fact that they would see that a variety of homes would include townhomes, patio homes, duplexes, and condos, because those are all, standard homes that we see mixed into communities. So I think that other than the small changes you wanted to make the focus word, I think this is good. I think, I wouldn't go too wild in changing this because I think we worked hard to get to this point, and I think that this would be acceptable, I think, to people as if they read it and felt that, it answers the need for the stepping stone housing, which I do agree with. I lived in a townhouse as well before, I moved up into another house. And so I think that I like the way this reads, and so I just want to put that in there.
Okay, thank you. I also saw in the comments of um, public transportation, about public transportation, which is another section in the plan. Also, the current version is reasonable and good. Um, making sure there are affordable options. We're going to go to Kristen and then we'll move on to the next section because I'm not seeing any other hands up. So, Kristen?
So I just had a quick question. So in both 243 and 245, it lists out bunch of different types of housing. And I was just curious why apartments was left out of that. For me, it just shows like a bias, like another bias against apartments. If we're listing out all different types of housing, I agree with the premise behind all of this to continue reducing the barriers and establish flexible development options. But I just, why don't we round it out and list all different types of housing, which includes apartments?
So for 243, that's actually based on state law. So that's to reflect a state law that is going to effect. It's already gone into effect, but it specifies the type of housing. And what it's asking or telling jurisdictions to do is we have to publish pre-approved home designs, which I don't know if multi and buyer can definitely weigh in on this. If multifamily, I assume the state didn't include multifamily because are a little bit different in terms of these are for a person who wants to buy a home and reduce costs and barriers. They can go in and pick a pre-approved design from a catalog, if you will, and then come to the town and get permits. So it saves them time. They still have to purchase it from the architect, but it saves them time and money through the process. So that's what 243 aims to do, is really focus on just on what that state law requires us to do. Action 245, this was part of the discussion with the resident working groups in terms of having that incentive to get those missing middle. So that was to reflect what we heard from residents in terms of they could, having townhomes, duplexes, condos, and then with the resident working groups, they focused on that missing middle as well. So that's my recollection. I'm seeing some head nods, but of course, if anybody has anything to add or if buyer has anything to add about the state law, please speak up. I'm seeing head shakes. Okay, so I'm not seeing any other comments. I'm going to move us on, our hands up, excuse me. So just to check in with the group, what I'm gathering is making that change to the guiding principle to remove the word limit. But overall, everyone can live with the actions on the screen. And then we'll go through and you'll have an opportunity to give more wordsmithing edits if there's any grammatical errors or things like that. Okay, so the next conversation is for high quality design. So the word high quality design is used twice in the plan. One is an action related to housing, the housing types. I will say we currently review all development for compatibility to the surrounding area, for safety, and to our design standards. So this does reflect what the town's doing. And then the second goal, GG, is to foster high quality design that enhances Oro Valley's unique suburban character. Now, there were concerns with the big community review that the term high quality can affect affordability. Again, we've haven't heard any concerns from home builders with our design standards, and we have amended them over the years. And when we do amend the design standards, we do work with the home building community as we're going through those as well. But if you have any questions or comments on these ones, if you think it is reflective and captures the community's expectations, or if it needs refinement. Rosa.
So I have a question. I think when we talked about this, we talked about the fact that the high quality design fit with the percentage of homes that are within HOAs that have even higher design standards, many of them. So I do recall we talked about the fact that that is already captured, I think, in like Rancho Vistosa, for example, all the different communities in here, there's a master and then there's the sub HOAs and it has this continuity of feel throughout the entire community. And I would consider that to be reflective of high quality design, but I think there's other communities with the same, like paint colors and roof lines and walls and things that make the communities what they are. I think we discussed the fact that that's already kind of ingrained. Am I wrong, or do I not, am I remembering, am I dreaming? Because I know we talked about that, and I don't have a problem with it. I know it doesn't say what it means, high quality design, but it it pretty much is reflective already in Oro Valley.
Yeah, and I don't know if in the 10-year plan we want to specify hog quality design. So the actions related to this would be, looking at the design standards and possibly updating them. And that's where you'd get the specifics in terms of what.
But you're saying removing high quality because it doesn't.
No, I'm just saying I don't think in the 10-year plan we wouldn't want to try to define what high quality design is. That would be through the implementation of the associated
So I
action.
think the comments that I read is that what does it mean, I guess, is the
Yeah.
Yeah.
like what does it mean? I mean, I think, if you live here, you know what it means, but I guess that's my question is like you highlighted it because are we going to discuss refining it or like why are we highlighting it?
So there were comments that the term high quality could
Yes.
impact affordability. And so we originally it was written as high quality to reflect Oro Valley's value for the built environment and how it looks in Oro Valley, which to your point, I think people did, especially in the resident working groups, talk about how it is a higher quality than the region. Um, and it is also there's a definite look in Oro Valley, if you will. And so that's the reason the word high quality was in there. Um, and then the actions related to this are about looking at those design standards and possibly updating them to make sure that the suburban character and the is maintained in Oro Valley.
Okay, I guess I don't have a problem with that, updating them as long as we're not going to change it in a way that would not reflect what we already have here. I guess that's my biggest concern. So,
We're gonna go Tom, then Hal, then Bill.
I think the design guidelines that we have in Oro Valley right now are really the backbone of the community. I would hate to see them um, changed in any way or fashion. I think in some places they call it gingerbread, but it makes the homes very attractive. You go down by the airport and look at houses down there, and come back up to Oro Valley and look at the houses here, and that's the difference between high quality and not so high quality. And again, I don't think we should monkey with our design guidelines at all. Thank you.
Okay. Hal?
Well, I think that we can leave this the way it is for now, but it really comes down to how it's applied when we get around to changing the zoning ordinance at some point. I mean, the context for this is, and you mentioned developers being okay with it, but I don't think they are. Uh, I mean, you've had two efforts in the state legislature in the last couple of sessions to basically offer starter homes, more affordable housing, led by the development community. Year before last, I think it was, they got something through, it was vetoed by the governor, but they'll probably take a run at it again. And you look at the kinds of design uh, uh, restrictions that they were talking about, much lower standards. So, and they would apply to a lot of communities, I think. So we'll see what happens. Leaving it as it is now is okay. I mean, I'm not a developer, but I worked with a lot of developers during my career. And I mean, what they really want is clear and objective standards. They got to know what it is they have to do. They don't want a lot of discretionary stuff that requires a lot of public hearings and things like that. And if that's what they have to face, then they probably won't show up for development. So they want certainty as to what they have to do and go from there. So leave it as it is, but it may have to be changed by as a result of state action in the future.
Thank you, Hal. And I do want to mention that I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but right now, when people are doing architecture for buildings in Oro Valley, they do go to our Planning and Zoning Commission, and many of them also have to go to council. That's changing though. So as of January 1st, any architecture, building architecture has to be administratively approved. So that is a state law that recently passed over this legislative period. And so in terms of the certainty that developers want, they won't be taking those applications to a commission or council anymore. Okay, just before we go to the next person, I am seeing some comments. Seems like there is some also agreement that they've heard from developers that they don't like the design standards. And I can definitely have Buyer speak more to his experience with developers over our design standards. And Jeff, we are talking more about appearance of homes, not the structural quality. Yeah, so we are talking about appearance of the exterior of the homes. And then Buyer, do you want to, before we go to the next person, speak more about your experience with the development community and our design standards?
Sure. So to give you an idea of a design standard, when a model home, let's say Pulte comes in with a model home and wants it approved, there are design standards that there need to be architectural treatments on all four sides of the building, not just the front. So we will typically the front is dressed up more than the back, and we understand that. And the guidelines allow that flexibility, but it doesn't permit, the other non-front sides of the building just to be completely blank. For example, that's an example of a design standard. Does that potentially affect the profit margin of a developer? Absolutely. But it's something that's been implemented for the last 20 years, 25 years. And we have watched adjacent jurisdictions, Marana, Sorita, adopt similar standards, if not stricter standards, to also bring up the quality of the housing stock and the look of their community. So it's for a developer, it's standard practice in municipalities in Southern Arizona to work within these. I think Hal's absolutely right. Proof's in the pudding in terms of the wording. And they have to be both very specific, but also allow for unique circumstances. So there's a balance. The last time we updated them, it involved meetings with developers. It involved intensive meetings with planning and zoning commission members to go through all of those details and really trying to affix reasonable standards. I think most folks want design standards, and I'm sure everyone wants reasonable standards. So the secret sauce, is how mentioned, is in the details. And every development application, every development we work on, we go through those standards, and those standards do allow a degree of flexibility. So overall, do I hear a lot of complaints from developers? The answer is a resounding no. It's a discussion. I can't say they love them, but there hasn't been a push of Oro Valley, you've got this wrong. So, in my estimation, it's working. Can they be improved? My opinion is every code can be improved. So improved, that is. So they are going to need to morph over time. But it has really become standard practice in all of southern Arizona.
Thank you, Buyer. And then I'm seeing in the comments that, yeah, we don't want low quality, which is the opposite of high, and some agreement with what Buyer just said. So let me, I guess, ask the group, is it the term high that's giving people pause? Not to get into that level of detail, but is there other changes? Again, I don't think we want to try to define what high quality means in the goal, but that's through the design standards themselves. But it seems like there's still some concern about that term high quality. Let's go to Joe, then Gail, then Susie.
Paragraph 270, expand and update. It's included in that as site developed homes, or I'm sorry, as site delivered homes. My question is that wording consistent with what we talked about previously about modular homes, trailers, something like that?
Yeah, so as part of that update to site delivered homes, right now there aren't any design standards for manufactured homes. There are, well, I shouldn't say there aren't. There are some within the code, but again, it's very specific to Highlands Mobile Home Park. So as part of looking at all types of site delivered homes, that could include tiny homes, we'd want to look at design standards for those too. And that's to also make sure there's that fit in Oro Valley. So one thing we can do that was suggested is, what if we put foster quality design? Take out the word high if that's kind of the concern. Maybe that it's going to get pushed too far. I'm seeing head shakes, thumbs up. Okay. Let's go to Gail, then Susie, then Sharon.
So my comment was going to be, before Buyer spoke, is would it be possible to just include some examples of what we mean by high quality or quality design to make it more clear to people? And so I love that Buyer gave the example about the fact that you have to have design elements on all four sides of the house. I think people people would read that and go, oh, okay, I get it. I've lived in other states where, they require you to do something in the front, but you could just do vinyl siding on the other three sides and not do anything. And that, is not what we're talking about. So I don't care if we say high quality or quality, but if we could include just a couple of examples of, what we mean by that in Oro Valley, that might make it more digestible for the community when they read this later. Because I think if we just say high quality, I was reading through the chat and we were all going, well, does that mean building standards? Does it mean appearance? What does it mean? So I think we'll get a lot of questions on it if we don't maybe talk about, just give a few examples.
Yeah. And to your point, we could also clarify that we mean exterior or architecture, because I saw that in the chat too.
Yeah.
Susie, then Sharon, then Bill.
I'm sorry, I'm pretty green on this platform. Actually, my question, what I was going to say was using the word quality design instead of high. That would be, I think, neutral enough for this. And also, what I was also going to say is that it is in the application of it, and it's, these are things that the design standards in Oro Valley, I've built homes up here for 45 years, and there were many builders who wouldn't do it. And I don't have a problem with it. It's the developers, I understand, but you can do that on a smaller scale, and that's, I think, a good idea for us. And there are many custom home builders who do those types of things. So I think this is going in a really good direction and a really excellent discussion and decisions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Susie, for sharing your experience. Sharon, then Bill.
I think we're heading towards the right idea with just going with quality design, because as I mentioned in the chat, there's other ways to save money. And one of them is in the construction materials. For example, in the house I live in, there's no plywood sheeting under the stucco. And that's something that's done throughout my entire development. So that has saved Pulte a lot of money in making these homes more affordable for them to build. So I think having the high quality design for appearance is a make sure that it's quality design is a better wording.
Right, and then Matt, if you want to give us our final comment on this topic.
Yeah, I really hate high quality. Maybe enhanced or something like that. There's no definition to that either, but high quality sounds a little snobbish. So maybe enhanced would be a better term. I don't know.
Just
We need,
quality. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
just kind of flesh that out a little bit.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to move us on. We will remove the word high quality and change it to quality or enhance. We'll look at a word in there. And then, okay, so now for those of you who are in the meeting on Tuesday, we talked about the Performing Arts Center and the action related to it. And I think what I heard from the group and consensus was the language in orange in that existing action was too restrictive. It needed to be softened, but still respect both sides because there are concerns about finances in the town's finances in the future. So this is on the right-hand side is the proposed draft. It is lengthy, but it tries to get at all those nuances. So give everyone a moment to read, and then Bill, looks like you're ready to comment.
Yeah, thank you, Melanie. As you know, I've been involved in this project for over a year now. We can live with this language because I think it says what is meant, and yet leaves the flexibility in the future, as it says, if any additional support is dependent on further community outreach and capacity. I mean, we are, in fact, there is no request for money from the town, and this says that, which, that we're doing it, but leaves the fact that if someplace down the line the town decides, not us, to do something, then that's fine. We wouldn't have to have a general plan amendment to do it. So I think it's a good happy medium compromise in the language and leaving it in. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Any other comments or questions about the revised language?
It's great.
Getting it
It's
more?
good.
Okay. Moving us on then. So we also talked about community gathering spaces. The existing action definitely emphasized the marketplace, not only as the hub, but it in the first one did specify only for them about who was funding. So what we heard in the last discussion was to reduce that emphasis on the marketplace, focus on the intent specifically about having more of a community corridor. So on the right-hand side, you'll see the changes. So it's no longer even working with the owners. It's really unifying that area, which was the intent, was to unify it as the gathering area. And then took out the first bullet completely just to seeking community gathering spaces with all new developments. So again, it should be all these areas to create that corridor, and then just removed the marketplace as a hub from that second bullet point. So I'm seeing thumbs up. Is this closer? Some head scratching though. So give everyone a moment to read and please raise your Hal.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what you're trying to say, and I think you need to be sort of open to identifying a location for a community gathering place. Uh, but I don't know. I get the quarter idea, but I'm not sure how it's going to work. And I mean, I have some background in parks and recreation and programming locations and things like that. I think that at some point you're going to have to identify a specific location, which is the primary community gathering place for Oro Valley. You might have others as well, but I don't think you can, have an equal number of equal quality. I just think you're going to have to specify one or maybe two. Uh, Certainly the marketplace is a possibility. I think the second choice would be Steampump Ranch, not Steampump Village. I think there needs to be further study of this. Keep your options open, but I'm a little concerned that this language is too broad in terms of where you might want to go.
Okay. And I think you're absolutely right in terms of part of the implementation of this would have to be probably getting to those level of specifics in terms of identifying the location, but we can work on the language too. Mike?
Yeah, I kind of agree with Hal, and maybe even more so. I didn't get the sense that in the surveys people said we need to have this unified gathering place. We just need a gathering place, and we need to identify what that is. It doesn't necessarily have to identify, 7 different places that have to be somehow merged together into this massive entity. Because they all have their advantages and disadvantages, but one thing I don't think is that it's terribly feasible to combine them all into one entity. So I would probably look to soften that unify piece, or maybe unify if possible. But to me, it's really focusing on which one of those is most feasible and most doable.
Okay. I will say these locations came from the resident working group meetings when you're right. What we heard from the community was just people want a gathering, central gathering area. And so through the resident working group meetings, that's where we kind of tried to get into, well, what does that mean? What does that look like? Where is that located? And an example I would give, it's not the best example, is if you've been in Phoenix, I think it's called Melrose. And as you enter, there's a big sign. So and it is just a street, but they do like Second Saturday events. They do all these things to help bring together. So they're not unified in terms of like one big area, but the signage, the programming, the architecture, the art, when you're in that district, if you will. Not to say that's how this would be implemented, but that's just an example. Rosa, then Sharon.
So I think we talked about the signage when we were talking about unifying it. I think that is exactly that's why there were so many. Like we said, if there was a sign like identifying where all the gathering places are, then someone who's not from here could find Steampunk Ranch and could find Marketplace. But then I think the separate discussion was in a central gathering space. And that was when the discussion of going to marketplace owners and working with them came up. And that was my big problem, only because we have done that. And what it resulted in is, sure, we'll make you one if you give us $9.5 million. So that was the whole reasoning for kind of like saying, why are we saying only Oregon Marketplace? It is unfortunately one of the biggest areas. So the only other one, there's not like of this list, it's just that and maybe Steampunk Ranch that has some possibilities. And Steampunk Ranch, because it already has the second Saturdays and the farmers market and other events. So that's why I mentioned that one. So you do probably have to focus on one. So maybe instead of unify, I don't know, I identify using signage, the various places in Oro Valley where the community gathers for events, and then and then not saying seeking or maybe not seeking, but another word besides seeking, like identifying a central community gathering area for events that bring the community together, something like that. Because now we also have Naranja Park. So we didn't have that mentioned when we talked about this, but that's also a place where you could have like an event or something. So yeah, I do think those were the two, like the one was like kind of unifying all the different areas with signage, and then the other one was a central place that could be the place that when Oro Valley has an event. But, you know, we don't have James D. Cray on here, and we have events in that park all the time. So it's kind of like we have more than one place right now for different things, and we have to capture that maybe somehow a little bit in this because that they are all gathering areas for the community, and I've been to all of them, you know. So, but like I said, the only thing I worry about is identifying a specific property owner or a property that doesn't belong to the town where we're going to um, you know, try to have this dream come to fruition. I think if we are going to do that, it has to be on a property we own so that it isn't involving somebody else. So that would be my comment.
Okay. So what I'm hearing and seeing in the chat as well is the word unify doesn't exactly work here in terms of that first sentence. And then also um, unifying all of them into the town central gathering area isn't uh, doesn't work either. So it's more unifying them through signage and everything else, but then identifying where that actual central gathering area is. Is that what I'm gathering from the comments we've heard so far? And then, yeah, private-public partnerships. And then Sharon?
Just going to add that, I think we had the discussion last week about wayfinding, signage, wayfinding, and the connectivity. Yes, I mean, there's a lot of things in that corridor that can be connected, but it's not practical to connect all of them. But finding ways to show that there's a lot to offer here in the town, and who knows what might come forward in the future as a self-identified developer who wants to try to find ways to be that central location for community gatherings. But we have a lot of opportunity in this town for community gatherings, and so we're very fortunate. It's just that there are some people, especially outsiders, who don't know where they are.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really important, is making sure that there's wayfinding opportunities that say, hey, guess what? Naranja Park is kind of hidden, and it's quite the gem when you get inside and you think, wow, this is an amazing place. So yeah, I think just wayfinding, making sure that people know what's out there.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. And I appreciate the comment because I should have mentioned this is only half of this action. There's like 4 or 5 more bullets about signage, wayfinding, very great point, um, and connectivity as well. So what I'm hearing is I appreciate the conversation. We were looking at it, as Bayer said, from a macro point of unifying it kind of thematically, but we can take another try at the language to get to more identifying that central gathering area and work on the word unify so it's clear for everybody of what that means. Okay. Any last comments on this one? Okay. So before we end, we're about 7:18. I do want to, and I know we're running low on time, but try to go back to the views one in terms of policies EE2 and policies EE3. Is this something that, as worded, folks can live with, or is there still need to be change? And thinking of, the entire community and how they'll interpret these items. And if it captures the broader community's guidance. Susie?
Yes, it seems to me that it would be fairly easily done by editing and changing a few words.
Okay.
Limit, restrict, consider in 3 is very, neutral. And I think the more we do that, the better chance we have of just passing this.
And McKenna also
On instead of restricting, there's ways to do that with language.
Okay. So yeah, we already definitely talked about removing the word limit, and then McKenna also said adjusting the word restrict would be helpful. To be, as Susie said, probably more neutral, like consider is and create. Other thoughts? Bev also said take out restrict and put in consider. Cheryl?
Well, I'll be the odd man out. I like restrict because I think it sets the parameters that the residents of this town voiced when they did the community survey. And I think anybody who lives next to an empty lot that might become some sort of another building that's more than 3 stories is not going to be happy with it and isn't going to vote for a plan unless we have some restrictions to show exactly what the people wanted, because they were not happy with some of the things that were done in the last plan that affected them, such as, and I know this is not the fault of the town, but we know that the people that live and overlook the wash were told by salespeople, it'll always be open down there. You'll never have to worry about your view. And then it turned out that that wasn't the case at all. And we have all the homes that are built down there now. So we want to make sure that we don't bring up things that are going to aggravate people that have already been impacted by it negatively, in my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. Sandy, then Susie.
I was going to say that consider is almost the opposite of restrict because it actually indicates that there's a possibility of approval. So I would be against replacing restrict with consider. Thank you.
Okay. I would just say that the existing zoning would handle much of that. To get a rezoning is not an easy thing. So the use of the property, the consideration would be, you have a 50-50 split on this. So we want to, the existing zoning would actually handle most of the problem with that.
Yeah, EE2 would only apply to rezoning requests. Yeah, the existing zoning rights would stay with the property.
Okay.
Yeah. Rosa?
I'm going to agree with Cheryl only because I sat in on a lot of like general plan amendment and rezones in the last several years. And I know that when someone is looking to see what Oro Valley is planning to do, they want to feel like that empty property next to them is not going to make them, have to give up 6 months of their life to go to neighborhood meetings and get all excited and upset. So I think that I agree with, softening limit, but I don't agree with going all the way over to, hey, let's just consider, I think we need to make sure we have some comfort in the language for people who are going to read this thing and say, yeah, I agree with this. So like I said, I know E2 does, talk specifically about rezoning, but nobody wants to go through a rezoning. And now with the language changes and the things that aren't going to council, I think that, I think we just need to make sure the language is comforting to people who are going to vote on this. That would be my comment.
All right. So still seeing that we're at a bit of a stalemate on this. I think Rosa, you bring up a good point, and Buyer put it in the chat as well, is if there's a 50-50 split, what do you think, taking ourselves out of it, what do you think the broader community, when they read this document, what would they support in this document?
I believe they would support softer language.
Okay, and I'm also
Evaluate is a good word.
evaluate.
And limit, those are great words.
Okay, so what if we're removing limit from EE1 and changing it to focus? What if in EE2 it's limit instead of restrict? Is that getting closer? Sandy
Yeah.
and McKenna.
It's still the same thing, isn't it? I mean, it's either no or it's something else. And consider or any other word is not a no, it's a something else. So that's really the question, isn't it? Do we want to restrict them? No. Or do we want to say, well, okay, we'll think about it. So I feel more comfortable with restrict.
Okay. McKenna?
I think that with language like restrict, with language like limit, then we are making a decision on behalf of a community that, generally speaking, is kind of 50-50 with growth or not growth. By choosing language that leaves it open, then we're allowing for town council and we're allowing for neighborhood conversations to make those decisions as issues come up. Because again, there could be times and instances where a 3-story or like a 4-story might actually be okay with people, right? Like, you just don't know until you see the exact issue. So I think by choosing language like limit or restrict or prevent, anything along those lines, it is leading towards the ability to shut things down before town council or before neighbors even have the opportunity to reflect on it or to add in consideration. It's still possible that even if we allow language that says we can discuss this, that the neighbors would say, no, we don't want that. And then it gets shut down, which is what happened with like Avila apartments, right? Like it brought to the neighbors, they said no, it got shut down. And that was a 1-story rental. So I think we just need to be cautious on utilizing language like restrict, because then as we have new council members or a new mayor coming in, they might read language like that and think that it means a broadband absolutely nothing, instead of we're just trying to make sure that we're not grotesquely offending our community, and we want to try to prefer or to encourage or to guide in a certain direction. So not using words like limit or restrict, but trying to focus on just this is what we would prefer, I think is kind of more from what I understand from the working groups is what people are feeling. And then that again still allows for the possibility in the future, but it doesn't enforce any set policy.
Okay. And I do think this one, it is definitely specific to namely apartments, which I think in the survey, folks were pretty clear about in terms of how high they want those. So just keep that in mind. Now the language still can be softened. I'm seeing ideas. But, again, thinking of the broader community of what you think they'll accept in terms of getting the plan approved. I'm seeing words like guide. Um, let's go to Kristen. You haven't spoke yet on this item, at least in this part of the conversation.
I obviously I tend to agree with McKenna's points, but also wanted to say if it's a rezoning request that goes before planning and zoning and then council, right? So why, again, kind of like echoing McKenna, why are we using the language limit or restrict when it has to go before, it has to be approved anyway? If a property owner owns private property, says, I think this will be the best and highest use of this property, I'm going to go ask council if they think it's okay. Why are we like immediately putting limiting language on if they can or cannot make that request? They can make the request, and if they get told no, they get told no. But why are we limiting, again, to McKenna's point, like it might be okay with the neighbors, but we don't know until we allow them to ask. So again, I agree with softening the language and taking out restrict or limit. I don't have the answer for the language, but I think it's too harsh.
Okay, thank you, Kristen. And I think the reason it's so specific is to try to give some guidance for future council. And the goal here is to make it reflective of what the community's prioritized. We are at 7:30, and so I do want to respect everyone's time. Can you guys give 10 more minutes if you have to sign off? I understand. Because we just want to, this is our last area that we want to get worked out. Okay, thank you all. I am sorry to keep us here longer. So I'm seeing in the comments also that in order to get the plan approved, it needs to say limit or restrict residential development, even though we would prefer more flexibility. So I guess, again, the question is, does limit work? Or focus for both of them. It seems like that was also.
Focus. Oh, so.
Okay, Mark, we haven't heard from you yet.
Yeah, interested listener to the discussion. I think that it's vernacular to a large extent because what we're not saying is a prohibition, which is exceptionally restrictive and concrete language. Nowhere does this say we're prohibiting something. So whether you say restrict, evaluate, focus, these are all conditional language by policymakers in the future based on those presenting conditions. So we do want conditional language, and I share Cheryl's and some others' concerns that the community may have an adverse reaction if there isn't some conditional language relatively firm with respect to this issue. It doesn't prohibit policymakers and elected officials from using that conditional language in a limited way to approve these things. So I think we're somewhat arguing about vernacular. It's not a prohibition. It's just the insertion of conditional language to make the community feel a little bit more comfortable with what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Okay, and then we're gonna go to Cheryl and then Susie.
Just wanted to point out one more time, only 14% of the people in this town were supportive of having having 4- and 5-story apartments. So I would leave it at restrict.
And then Susie.
Well, I would agree with that statement for that particular part of it. Definitely. But I also think it will put off the other part, many other people. I was one of those who did go up against the town on Rudy Ranch many, many decades ago. And it is a process, but the problem is the elected officials change. And I think giving them that language, a future council may take it a little bit further than is planned.
So I'm gonna check in again with folks because I saw head nods before, and I know it's still, again, trying to achieve that compromise and balance. So we might not get all the way to having it like removed, but does the word limit help at all to limit rezoning requests? No. Okay. Jeff and then Rosa.
So on EE1, I think we've heard focus 2 to 3 story apartment communities.
Yeah.
So I want to point out that that could be interpreted as it would be by me, that we actually are trying to say we want to build a whole bunch of 2 and 3 story apartment communities along the major roads. What the intent here is to say is we don't want to have we don't want to have 2 and 3 story apartment buildings at all, but if we are going to have them, we want them to be limited along the major roads in commercial areas. So I think if you say the word focus, you are to many people saying we want to build a whole bunch of 2 and 3 story apartment communities along the major roads and near commercial areas. And that's not what the community wants to say. So I don't know if limit's the right word, but focus is not a good replacement just in terms of the etymology of the language there.
Yeah, that's a good point. Rosa?
So I agree with what Jeff just said, because I was just going to be quiet on that one because I think I beat a dead horse. But people are coming into this cold. 75% of them are homeowners. So when they read number one, they say, okay, I won't have to go to neighborhood meetings and worry that even if I win this battle and give up all my free time and make posters and write speeches and do all the things, that when a new council comes in, I won't have to start all over again and do it again. And so that's that comfort that we want to give people. So I agree with him on that. And as for whether we say restrict or limit, I mean, if I have to be a cooperative, like, team player, I'll be okay with limit. But limit and restrict say the same thing to me. Let's tamp this down and let's respect the fact that when people answered that survey, they reacted to the building heights for apartments and storage areas and stuff. They all reacted to it in a very, very positive way, that they wanted restrictions, they wanted limits. So I would be willing to go along with everybody if we go back to limit and number one, and we change number two to limit as well, because it's more of the same, and I think it gives the same impression. But like I said, I really want the people who sat through those. I mean, I sat through a lot of neighborhood meetings in the last couple of years, and people get very, very upset about the thought of having to fight to keep their property values. And I think that's what you're going to read when you read this as a person wanting to approve this plan. And that's what I keep coming back to, the language that is in the document that people are going to read and say, yes, I agree with this, or no, I don't agree with this. And so that's why I think we need to be very careful with the language.
Okay. All right. I know there's some hands up, but I wonder with the group, or I'm going to ask with the group, is I hear you. There seems to be a 50-50. I'm not sure if we're going to get to a point of resolving this tonight. So, is this something that you guys would like to meet again on in January to discuss, or should it be left as is and let the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council discuss it further? And you're also welcome to speak at all those meetings. Is it something that when it goes to the commission and council next year should be part of that discussion? So keep it as is, but for now. And um or do you all want to take some time to think about it and we meet again in January?
No.
I don't know if we'll get anywhere then either, so I'm not sure. Okay. So on that note, from what I'm hearing and I'm seeing just a lot of blank faces, so I'm not really sure which way you want to go. But right now, we're going to leave EE2 and EE3 as is. It's definitely still worth a discussion, but that might just need to be with the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council when it goes before them. So I do want to thank all of you. I know we lasted longer. This was a great discussion. And I want to say that the fact that we've come down to one issue that we cannot figure out as a group, when there's at this point 279 actions and a lot of goals and policies, you guys all should be very proud of yourselves. There's a lot of collaboration, a lot of compromise that's been done. So with that said, the next steps for the plan in terms of where it's headed next, and also to help with some of the questions about when the deadline is. Apologies, just give me one moment. Let me bring this back up. Okay. So in January, so what we'll be doing first is we will send you guys all the revised draft. So the 90% draft still won't have all the bells and whistles in the PDF, but it will have all the language in there. We'll be getting that out to you all. Again, we really need your help with the wordsmithing and the editing. You guys did a great job with the 30% review, so asking you to do that again. You could email your comments. Staff were available to meet with folks too, to go through them and to discuss further. So just let me know if you want to meet and discuss. What will happen then is that 90% draft will be sent out to all surrounding jurisdictions and agencies for the legally required review on their part. And then the draft will go to the Public Planning and Zoning Commission for 2 public hearings. So there's 2 opportunities to speak in front of them. And then in May, it will go to Town Council for public hearing. We also want to show our appreciation to all of you. You've committed a lot of your time, um, uh, commitment, and dedication to Oro Valley's future. So we would like to host an appreciation dinner for all of you. We also want to acknowledge you at that public hearing with Town Council. And so I'll be reaching out with further details, but we would like to set up a dinner and then have you all who can attend that public hearing to at least be acknowledged, even if you don't want to speak. After council approval, that basically signifies that the plan is ready to be on the ballot for vote. And so we will also be reaching out and relying on all of you in those months to help spread the word and let folks know about the plan, to help prepare the community to vote on it in November. Okay. So with that, thank you again for taking the extra time tonight. Our last meeting for a while, and of course we go over, but I appreciate all of your time and the really great conversation tonight, and hope you have happy holidays.